Hi, this is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. So, I want to talk about fear. Fear is sort of an all-pervasive thing in ourselves, our background, our societies, and it influences us often in ways that we don't pay attention to. Um, and, for good shadow work, being able to access and understand fear in ourselves is extremely important. And for good magical work, you need to be able to do that as well, because fear can kind of stop us in our tracks and keep us from going forward. So, first off, fear is sort of a visceral and animalistic response to anything that we don't know, whether it's like a sound that's unfamiliar to us, a movement, a light, um, anything that is a part of our environment that suddenly changes will generally elicit some kind of physical bodily fear response. We can train ourselves not to succumb, I guess, to it, but it's normal because although we like to think of ourselves as apex predators, in reality are vulnerable to injury and harm because, without extraordinary devices or technology or weapons or a group of other people around us who protect us, in reality, we have very soft fronts and underbellies, and injury is something that can happen just like that. And fear can help us to navigate potential hazards in our environment if we use it for that. So it's not like fear is bad in and of itself. It's just that when you're starting to work on yourself, understanding your own root fears is important to being able to make progress. All right, so I had this experience, and I had this guy who I'd never done hash before. I couldn't smoke it anyway, so he had me eat it. And he had me eat an entire gram. For those of you who know how powerful that is, yeah, it was something else. And I hallucinate easily. We've talked about that before. And in this case, it was like the back of my head turned cold, like ice. And then all these things came out of the back of my head and came in front of me so I could look at them. And they were all of my fears. But I was in such a state that I wasn't afraid of them. I was just kind of observant of them. And it was certainly an interesting experience, that part of it. I understood pretty readily that you can have a fear of everything. So fear of success, fear of failure, fear of being alone, fear of being together. It doesn't matter what the subject matter is. There is always the potential to have fear of it and its opposite. It's like this entire dance of thoughts and emotions and feelings and things like that glommed together and, exploded out of my head. So that in itself was certainly an interesting revelation, to become aware of that. And fear is only useful if it serves a specific purpose to alert you to possible dangers, and then you can identify the danger and then take actions to avoid the danger. So I'm not saying that we should be completely and totally unafraid of anything and everything that's out there, because I would never say that. It's an important survival mechanism that we have evolved with. The problem becomes when it is undifferentiated to the point where we are afraid of literally everything and anything that happens that's strange and different. And, in my view, this fear of things that are different is the basis for most racism, homophobia, I mean, whatever other group there might be out there, targeting another group, becoming afraid of them, placing things upon them to put our fear somewhere outside of ourselves so that we can externalize it, project it, and so forth, and then not be consumed by it in other ways. And so when we're looking at our core and at the things that confound and confuse us, it's important for us to identify those things in ourselves. Like Ian talks about his realization that he was afraid at one point, this was before I ever met him, of gay people, because on some level he realized he thought he might be gay, and for some reason this was very anxiety producing, and he thought that was silly, and so he decided to open himself up to the possibility, and then discovered he wasn't, and then he wasn't afraid of it anymore. And that's actually the tactic that we tend to employ when we're trying to grow beyond an unspecified or irrational fear of something and we're not sure what it is. So knowledge is probably one of the tools that you can use in order to alleviate and face down certain fears. Certainly fear of death is a huge one for a lot of people, and that's another one of those things. Death is inevitable. None of us can avoid it. There's no way to avoid it. We don't know when it's coming for sure. Our bodies are finite as far as their ability to sustain our spirit. Our spirits may not be, but that doesn't change the fact that our bodies will at some point expire, and then we will be left to we're not sure what. So fear of death is a very natural thing, for all of us to have to deal with at some point. And being able to think about, plan for, face that fear is important to our spiritual development. If we're always worried about what might happen to us and when it's going to happen, it's difficult to get anything done. And for me, having that near-death experience where I went into the light several times and kept being brought back, and combined with coming into this life, remembering other lifetimes, sort of alleviates that aspect of that fear. That doesn't mean I want to give in or give up at any one point. I had Ian and I went to Hawaii when we first bought our house, so that's been a while. And when we were there, I almost drowned in the ocean. It was one of those situations where, well, here we are, and there's 5 20-foot waves heading in our direction, and we have to figure out how we're going to survive. And, I was not willing to just sort of give in and give up. So the only thing I could do was hold my breath and try to relax, because this particular wave set and the beach that we were at, the wave went down to the bottom, and just, there was nowhere to get away from the movement and the tumbling and stuff like that of the water. And in between the waves, I would make myself, make my way back to the surface and take a breath and see another one coming. I mean, it was like one after another, after another, after another. And by the time we made it to shore, Ian was in front of me, and I was like 2 feet behind him. And it was one of those beaches where the wave goes all the way to the end. It's not like there's not like a break and then there's a little bit of stuff. It's like the whole wave went all the way up to the top of the beach. and then of course the current of the wave would start to pull you back out. And at this point I was pretty exhausted. There really wasn't any strength left in my body. And Ian was able to get his feet in the sand, but I'm shorter than him, and I could just touch the sand with my toes, and then the wave started pulling out and lifted my feet up off of the bottom of the ocean. And I knew in that moment that if I didn't get out, I was going to die, because I had no energy left to keep myself going and to survive being pulled out to sea. So I yelled really loud. It was extremely loud. The waves were loud. Everything was loud. So I had to yell, scream at the top of my lung to Ian to let him know that I was in trouble, which he didn't realize because he was fighting for his life at the same time that I was. So he turned around and he grabbed my arm, and my arm was pulled out because it was wet and slick with the salt water, and then he grabbed my swimsuit strap. And he grabbed a hold of that strap and held on, and that was the only thing he had, was to hold on to my strap. And there was this guy standing not far from us, so I started screaming at him because I couldn't stand up, and I knew there was another wave coming. So this random person came up, grabbed my arm, and helped pull me out, and I knew how lucky I was. I also felt that it wasn't personal. When I was in the middle of it, I mean, a lot of times we take these things personally. We think that the universe is against us, we've done something wrong, or, that this is some wrath or punishment or whatever. And the ocean didn't really even notice that I existed. It was just doing its thing, being a wave, and trying to grind everything it found into smaller particles to become sand. I mean, it was just this unconscious force. So I never really felt like I was targeted, which is probably a good thing, because if you feel that, then there's other issues you have to work through. But I definitely knew that was close. That was a very close call, but I was fighting to stay alive. And the next morning, seeing the sunrise, I didn't sleep all night, because every time I closed my eyes, I was back under the water, and that's when I realized I had my eyes open, and I saw all this moving motes of sand and stuff like that in the current, which was not something I'd been consciously aware of when I was going through it, which was just sort of interesting in and of itself. But so I was very grateful that I was still alive. I was injured. I ended up, I almost broke my neck. I mean, if I hadn't relaxed and stuff like that, and I was lucky enough not to hit a hard surface, just the bottom of the ocean, I could have easily broken my neck. But I didn't fracture anything, but I damaged the ligament that holds your skull onto your spine, and there's a nerve that comes out of there that controls your heart and your lungs, which is not a good nerve to have pinched. That's a bad thing. So I started having issues. Not long after that, started having a heart arrhythmia and breathing problems, and that worried me. And every night when I went to bed and the weird beating would start and so forth, I wasn't sure if I was going to wake up in the morning. So I went to the doctor because I wasn't used to having that kind of feeling. I had never been like anxious going to sleep that I'm not going to wake up in the morning. And so I went to my doctor, and he finally confirmed that I did have an arrhythmia. I had to prove it to him. I had to wear a monitor and send him the file every morning kind of thing. And he sent me to an acupuncturist. And this particular acupuncturist was also a medical doctor, and he was a member of a guru that is or was in the line with Muktananda, but failed to continue far enough into the process to get out of the ego trap section. So, he wrote this book, something like The Promised God Man Has Arrived or whatever. And anyway, this particular acupuncturist's view of what happened to me was that I had been afraid to die, and that was a bad thing. That I had missed the opportunity to surrender and clear my karmic slate and whatnot. And there was a bunch of other things that were involved in that as well that came out later, but still, that upset me, to say the least. It's like if I hadn't fought to live, I would have been dead. It wasn't that I was afraid to die, I wasn't willing to surrender to death in that moment. And yeah. So he and I didn't get along. Not for very long. And finally, after this went on for at least 2 years, I think, that I was dealing with this, maybe longer, I went to see my chiropractor, and the chiropractor adjusted my neck. He found that my atlas, the one right at the base of the skull, C1, was completely dislodged from my occipital ridge there, and he'd never seen one out that far. And when he adjusted me, the arrhythmia stopped. 2 weeks later, it was still stopped. I tried at first not to get too excited because I thought maybe this is a fluke. But so then I went to him and I asked him whether or not, what that adjustment could have done to stop my heart arrhythmia. And he told me about the vagus nerve that came out of there and taking pressure off that nerve, which is a nerve that doesn't have a sensation. It's not like a nerve that will cause you pain, so it's harder to identify when you're going through it. But it is a nerve that does control your heart and your lungs. And if it's not working right, you're going to be dead. That's kind of the way that works. So my chiropractor saved my life. Absolutely, no doubt about it. Why I'm still here. But the stuff it brought up, about fear and death and when do you surrender kind of thing, was certainly an interesting internal journey that I took when that happened. So in any moment, in any given moment, you have to prioritize whether your safety is more important than some spiritual quest of surrender and becoming one with the universe. Is this the right time for that? And I don't consider that is a fear of death. It's just a choice to continue to exist. It doesn't have to be based on fear. And I don't feel afraid at this point. Who knows what could happen? Anything can happen, and your body has its own responses. Like we had a neighbor last year who shot off a whole bunch of mortars right next to my head on the other side of the wall where I sleep, and I freaked out. I just freaked out, started running, screaming. I thought there was a gun battle going on next door. I could hardly talk on the phone when I was calling 911. I called my daughter to tell her goodbye because I'm going to die in the next couple of minutes. And, it's like, it was definitely fear, absolutely. But it got me out of my bedroom, got me running down the hall, And so I acted on it. So it didn't paralyze me. So I guess that was probably good. But, we're human and we don't always act exactly the way we would like to. So the other kinds of, the other forms of fear that we have to figure out how to deal with, fear of intimacy, fear of being in a relationship, fear of not being in a relationship, fear of being alone, whatever it is that we're going through, we need to look at it and decide whether it's a reasonable fear and something that we can do something about, or if it's an irrational fear and it's just like this all-consuming thing that's controlling us and it's not useful. So fear can be useful up to a point, and then at some point it becomes paralyzing and not useful. And it doesn't help that we add our judgment against ourselves and everything that we do on top of that. Like, oh yeah, I could have done a better job, and what a stupid person I was, or what have you, or I'm alone because I'm not worthy of love and nobody wants to be with me, or every time I get in a relationship it falls apart and is utterly destroyed. I certainly know that one from being attracted to the wrong kind of individual because of my past and what my father did to me and so forth. And so healing all of those things is a part of this process. I mean, that's what shadow work is really for, is to go back into the self and that self-identity and figure out what are the things that are motivating and moving us in the direction they're taking us, and then deciding if that is a direction we want to go or not. And I think that need to externalize fear is actually at the base of most conspiracy theories, trying to find some other group to explain what's happening to you, or the people that you care about, some grand conspiracy of some force out there that's just trying to destroy the world or destroy your life or destroy your way of life or destroy the way you think or what have you. And it becomes this fight for survival in a bad way. It's like, I think one of the biggest fears that people have is looking at themselves and discovering that they've made some pretty big mistakes in judgment. And with my father, for example, after, I didn't see him from the last time I saw him, I think I was 18, 17, somewhere in there, when my mother and he were getting a divorce. And I never saw him again in this life. It's like that was the last time we had any close contact with each other. But definitely was afraid of him, and then damaged by what he did to me, and it wounded me in such a way that I kept looking to fix that wound, thinking unconsciously or subconsciously that if I could find someone who was like him and change them and their opinion of me, then that would fix me, which doesn't work. That's a no-win scenario, because if the person who hurt you is not capable of love and you keep refining them in other versions, then they're not capable of doing the thing you're trying to get them to do. And so that's why that doesn't work. It's certainly complicated. And we're always going through some kind of level of development and self-awareness and being kind to ourselves for our lack of understanding coming from a previous place of experience is important. That's one of the things that survivors of abuse, when you're abused as a child, often as an adult you will look back with an adult's view of the world and understanding of what's going on, and then judge your younger self as having been stupid or cooperating or participating or whatever, and judge yourself harshly, which is not a good thing, and it's inappropriate and untrue. It's unfair to judge a 4 or 6-year-old from a 30-year-old's perspective, and that's a pretty common thing that we do. So being kind to yourself and your past mistakes, you can't move forward if you can't acknowledge and accept mistakes that you've made, and then learn how to modify or change your behavior, change your energy patterns, so you change the things that come to you, change the things that you're attracted to, change the things that are important to you. And this is true of all of the different levels of those things. So fear is really huge in religion, and certainly when I first started out, even though I wasn't ever totally and completely taken in by the Methodist religion I was raised in, all those ideas that they planted in my head. Women were evil because of Eve, and we were the problem, the cause of all problems, certainly added to my lack of self-esteem, thinking there was something wrong with me. And then that fear of being tricked by the devil and actually working for the devil and not knowing it, and that idea that I've shared before where I thought that there was some intrinsic evil hiding inside of me that I could not fight. that at some point it would come up and come out, overpower me, and win. And I know that that was based on both my experiences of reality in my family home and the religion I was raised in. And so changing my path from that to becoming a full on witch and pagan, there was that transition period where there was a lot of times I had fear, anxiety, and self-doubt. Like, am I doing this right? Is this the wrong thing to do? Are they right about this? Is this really going to blow up in my face? And, is this really all evil and so forth? And those are the other kinds of fears that you have to deal with when you start to walk this path, because they're unique to us. I mean, if you never challenge your view of the world or the way that you were raised, then you don't experience this particular aspect of it. If people who just accept where they are in society and what their parents have taught them, what their society has taught them, and never question that or become uncomfortable with it, then they just keep going and it doesn't become an issue. So, and it is a serious question that comes up for a lot of pagans who are beginning to walk the path, not so much for people who are raised in a pagan environment or a pagan household, who don't have all that unconscious, subconscious programming laid into them by their family, even though some of them can have a little bit of that from society at large or shows that they watch and whatnot. It's definitely part of that process of looking at those fears, because those are huge fears. And when I went through that shamanic dismemberment thing, crossing the abyss, whatever, that I talk about in that video, that was a big part of it. The religion was part of that. And the idea that somehow Satan was going to come and take me away and whatnot, there was a lot of that stuff going on during that experience. So it definitely brought it all out. So I know it was there. It's like there's no doubt that that was there. So I'm assuming other people go through similar things. And if you're one of those lucky ones, yay you. Find something else that you're afraid of and work with that. But, clearing yourself out, it's like it's an individual path for everybody and not necessarily easy. So for me, trying to clear all that stuff out, the cup transformation spell or exercise was something that helped a lot, because that was a way to acknowledge those feelings or fears or anxieties, and then accept them, that they were there, and then try to transform them into something that was more useful for me. And, if you haven't watched that video, watch that video, because I go through and explain that entire process pretty detailed. And, other things like using the rock on my forehead and screaming my rage and anger into the universe. Anger and fear are often related, but not always. But, that was accepting how I was feeling. And if you can't acknowledge and accept how you're feeling, then you can't move through it and move forward through it. So back to not being able to accept someone's, your mistakes in the past. With my father, when I went through therapy, we went through the incest survivors group, and one of the things that the leader of the group asked was whether or not I wanted him to know how I felt, and I did. And so I wrote him a letter, and her question was, do you want him to read the letter? And I did. So she said, tell him that you're sending it to everyone else in the family, and then he'll have to read it to know what other people are seeing. So then I did. And then I took it a step further, and I actually sent it to everyone else in the family. Talk about starting a shitstorm. That was, yeah, my black sheep status was definitely confirmed at that point. I was always causing trouble, trying to get people to face reality. But, when I was writing that letter and telling him about the things he did and how I felt and so forth, even with all of that, at the end of the letter, I said that even with all the stuff that he had done to me, I could still become proud of him if he accepted responsibility for what he did and and uh, and healed himself. Worked towards becoming a better version of himself. And of course, that was something he couldn't do. And I thought about why, and my theory is that for people like him who are stuck in that place, the idea of acknowledging the wrongdoing that they've, you know, perpetrated on others or the mistakes that they've made means that the way they look at it is that, so I was born, I went through all this stuff, and I'm here, and I failed. I failed completely in this life. Everything I did from that point to this point was a waste of time. If I admit that this was wrong, I also have to admit to myself that I wasted a life. And that's not true. I mean, that's the story, I think, that the unconscious is telling them, or him, in his case. But I don't think that that's actually true. I think that the waste of a life is never acknowledging who you were, because then you can never move forward. It's sort of like being stuck in amber. It's like, that's it. That's all you get out of the life that you're in, is refusing to acknowledge that you're human and make mistakes and that you're not perfect. And then you have to do it all over again. At least I think that might be the case. So that's one of the other things, is like, if you're working on admitting what your fears are, one of the fears is finding out that you are not a nice person, that you hurt other people, even if you didn't realize you were doing it at the time, and not wanting to acknowledge that, because then you have to work to change things if you're going to move forward. So that's another fear, and a big one, that I think stops people from transforming and changing into better versions of themselves and taking control of their relationship with the universe, so that they can redefine who they are and how they're going to interact with the universe, which is a really mucky and uncomfortable and messy transition. It does not, there's not like a single epiphany that just pops in your head and then all of a sudden, bam, everything is better and you know everything now. It's messy because we have layers of things. We get through one part of that and think everything is great. We've now gotten to a new balance. We have a new understanding, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, the universe goes yank. And then we're flying through space off a cliff, wondering how the heck we got there. And yeah, that kind of thing. And then we have to deal with it again, but on a different level. It's like each time we are able to face and deal with these things, we get stronger and we get more out of it. And then we understand that it's a process, and it's okay if the process is messy. At this point, I've gone through the messy stuff long enough and often enough that if I get triggered, which doesn't happen very often, but still can happen, then I know what I need to do. I need to allow myself to be in it, to experience it, to cry or rage or whatever it is that I need to do in order to move the energy through, so that I can get back to the other side of it and leave it behind. And without facing these things and re-experiencing them and going through them, we are doomed to be controlled by them, because they're still there if we haven't moved that energy in some way. So, dealing with the fear of the unknown is another part as we walk this path and we begin to open up our senses, our clair abilities, being able to see spirits or sense spirits or feel other people's energy, feel their emotions, whatever it might be, that generates another type of fear. It's the fear of the unknown and the unfamiliar. And a lot of people get worried by that. They're not sure what's going to happen. Like looking at yourself in a mirror and suddenly your face starts to morph into something else. This often generates a pretty intense fear response in people because, your face isn't supposed to change. It's supposed to stay the same. And you are now doing something to make that change. And, is that spirit a safe spirit or an unsafe spirit? And then you watch these paranormal shows. I like watching some of them sometimes because I like the guys that scream and run like all hell has just gotten loose and is after them because, something fell. And it's like, evaluate, is that dangerous? That thing that fell off the shelf? I mean, it didn't throw itself across the room and hit you in the head. It just kind of fell. Or there was a sound, or, or a wind. You suddenly felt a cold breeze. And it's almost like we give these invisible things a lot more power than they actually have, and like then sort of throw this fear into them of like, oh my goodness, they're going to get inside me, they're going to possess me, they're going to haunt me, they're going to like do whatever. Which is one of the reasons why I recommend people who are experiencing that level of fear not do paranormal investigations. Because in an investigation, fear is actually the least useful response that you can have when you're trying to figure out what's going on, because fear kind of muddies things. It glosses over details and just makes this big ball of ick. And, it's like, and in that ick, you can't see what's really going on. You can't evaluate. And being able to be sensible, alert, evaluate a situation, determine whether there is a danger or not, is a rather important facility to maintain when you're dealing with things that most people don't encounter, perhaps. That's one of the reasons why I say that, that kind of fear response often turns a haunting into something completely different. Because, they're very influenced by what we believe and what we think is happening, and we can project that onto a normal haunting and turn it into demonic door to hell kind of stuff, and think that that's really what's going on, and that's what was happening all along, and they were just trying to trick us, etc., etc. So, our lack of understanding of how much our thought processes and our feelings influence things that we don't see regularly is one of the things that really gets us into a lot of trouble, which is why meditation is important to teach us how to control our emotions and our feelings and our thoughts, so that we can, and learning how to center and ground is so important, because without that we can get thrown off our center, and then we're kind of flying through space trying to figure things out. And that's why self-determination or self-definition and boundaries are important, because then we can maintain a level of distance between us and the phenomenon that we're looking at. And, not project so much onto it. It's definitely a process. So that kind of fear is, like I said, about the least useful form of fear that's out there. I mean, if you're walking down the street and there's a dark corner coming up and you suddenly have an intuition that someone might be hiding around that corner, ready to jump out, cross the street. Follow that fear, because those kinds of things should never be ignored. But being able to tell the difference between like that kind of thing and then just being afraid of anything you can't see, it's a matter of degree, definition, situation, and we're human and we make mistakes, so sometimes we might jump to the wrong conclusion. Just why you want to try and keep your wits about you and stay alert and, make sure that you're safe. So, coming up with strategies to protect yourself, cleansing rituals, or casting a circle around yourself, or having a group of people you trust with you who also have abilities and can add their input to what's going on, checking in with others to find out, is this all in my mind or is this in all of our minds, which is going to change how we treat this situation. When I talked about the haunted objects and I talked about the Buddha spirit, somebody wrote in and said that freaked them out and worried them and they didn't like it. And I thought that was interesting, because certainly for us, the reason why that spirit needed to be rescued was because it had been abused by, the soldiers that had come in and cut off its head. And us giving it a new house and a safe place to be solved all of the issues and all of the problems. And we have no problem with the spirit of the Buddha that's in there. And whoever wrote in, had a problem with the idea of dealing with Buddha itself. That tells me that there's some kind of underlying religious programming that's going on, or some suspicious information that has been fed to them about it that they've picked up on or whatever, and that would be a good thing to look at. If you have an anxiety about a certain pantheon, you can either decide that means you shouldn't work with them at all, or look at why and decide that it's because I saw this movie, or I had this experience, or I was raised in a certain religion and they have this attitude towards this, or whatever. And the more information you can get about why you feel about something, the better, because then you can make a conscious choice and a decision to either follow through on that feeling and decide to give it, weight and say, okay, this is just something I shouldn't deal with, and that's perfectly fine. Or this is something that I don't understand why I'm afraid of it, and there's no reason that I am afraid of it, and maybe I'm wrong to be afraid of it. Maybe I have some underlying prejudices that I've absorbed from other people. So becoming a conscious human is a lot of work. It doesn't happen by itself, and it is definitely not something most people are interested in even trying, because of the fact that it takes a lot of work and self-reflection and all that jazz. But you guys are here for a reason, and so I'm giving you this information, and if you use it, great, and if you don't, that's up to you. And that's always the case with anything I say. These are my opinions and my perspective and my experience on things. And, we're all different, and we all have different experiences and different perspectives and so forth on what's happening around us. So always follow your particular instincts about something, and don't follow something I say just because I say it. That is not what this is about. So trying to think if there's anything else to say about this that would be helpful right now. Nothing is coming to mind. So that's probably enough talk about the subject for now, and maybe we can talk about it more as time goes on, or you can have questions and ask me, because I'm certainly willing to give you my perspective on things. And that's one of the things that hopefully you all know by now. If you ask me a question, I will give you my actual perspective and answer to that question. It may not be the answer you're looking for or expecting, but it will be what I actually think about something, and that's what I'm offering. Not to lead you around by the nose to decide stuff for you, but to tell you my perspective on things, and if that's helpful, that's great. And if it isn't, then you can ignore it, and that's fine too. Because I apparently don't have that particular fear. At least not at this point. Whatever that fear would be called. Fear of acceptance, fear of lack of acceptance, fear of other people's opinions. Because I know who I am, and me and the universe are the only opinions that matter, as far as I'm concerned. That kind of thing. So anyway, hope you are all doing well wherever you may be, and whatever process you're going through, and hopefully something in what I've said is helpful. Have a great time learning who you are, or not. Have a great time not having a great time learning who you are. That doesn't work, does it? Anyway, I hope you're all doing well in any event. And this is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. Blessed be.